Hi everyone, it's Ardith, and today I've got 4 cards with some ideas for using alphabet stamps and dies in unexpected ways. This video is part of the Birch Press Design March 2020 blog blitz, and there's a giveaway, so be sure to click on the link below to my blog for all the details. First, let's take a look at the modern alphabet sets. There's a stamp set with outline and regular capital letters. These letters are about half an inch tall. And I'm noticing that the O's are perfect circles, which opens up a lot of design potential. Then there are matching dies, and I mean for both sets of alphabets. So there are some great layering possibilities here, as you can see here with these X dies. For my first card, I've taken out both dies for the letters in hugs, as well as the narrow X and O dies. I'm going to use some Be Creative tape on the back of my cardstock so that my letters will be sticky on the back once they're cut, but you can always use a Xyron sticker maker or liquid glue to make this work. I cut the bigger hugs letters along with my first set of X and O from this white panel, and when they came out of the Gemini Junior, I had to think of a place to store them temporarily until I was ready to use them. I pulled out a piece of acetate, which in the end turned out to not be a great idea. We'll talk about that in a minute. Then I continued cutting out X's and O's until I had enough to cover my card. For the top layer of the hugs letters, I chose 4 different colors of glitter cardstock from this new Twinkling Jewel glitter pad, and I cut a tiny piece for each letter. I put Be Creative tape on the back again, but you could use other adhesives and they would work just as well. To store them, I figured I would just press them down onto the larger white die cuts that were already on the acetate. These letters are a nice size and easy to work with, but pressing them down onto the acetate made them stick pretty well to it. For my card front, I'd already blended ink onto a panel of white cardstock, and now I'm going to use the bold striped stencil to add some more color and texture to it. I started by placing it down so the stripes were horizontal on the panel, and I went over everything with the same colors of inks that were already on the panel. This gave me a nice tone-on-tone effect. And then I wanted to turn it to create a kind of plaid, and I ended up with a big black smudge. I hate that so much. I couldn't even figure out where it had come from. But I was too far into it to start over, so I'll just figure out how to fix that later. I turned the stencil and blended the inks again, starting from the green at the bottom this time and working up to that deep red. These wide stripes gave me a nice grid pattern on my panel, and that will help me with placement of all my letters. I spritzed the panel with some water and lifted off some of the color with a paper towel to create some texture and interest. And then I started placing my hugs letters. And that's when I really realized that the acetate was not a smart choice as a temporary storage location. These letters were really stuck, especially those doubled up letters that I had pressed the top layer onto. On the bright side, this does mean that you could make an acetate card front and the letters would not just slide off. But I struggled a little here, and I had to be very, very careful not to tear any of the letters. I used the grid to help me place the rest of my X's and O's, and I left a space to put the rest of my sentiment right over that smudge. When I was done, I trimmed off the excess bits of the letters with my snippy scissors. Then I got out a Hugs and Kisses sentiment from the You Are Awesome sentiment set, and I put it into my MISTI. I used some tape to mask the hugs portion of it, and I simply stamped the And Kisses with the VersaFine Onyx ink. I trimmed it down and then popped it up right over that smudge, and it's like that mistake never happened. I put the whole thing onto a white card base to finish it. For my next card, I cut some strips of the glitter cardstock, and I put Be Creative tape behind it. This time I'm only going to use the 2 O dies, and I just kept cutting and cutting until I had a glittery rainbow of ring stickers to make my card with. And this time I stored them right on my water media mat, and that silicone was a much better solution than the acetate. The bonus of this process was not only did I get the O's, but I got a bunch of glittery dots from the centers as well. To create my card front, I started lining up a pattern of fat O's, then skinny O's, and watching my color mix. I did the top line, and then I did the line down the right side, so that I could keep everything straight and lined up properly. I counted 5 circles across and 7 down. I had planned to use a sentiment strip, so I left an area without any of the O's where I thought the sentiment would go. We'll revisit that in a moment. I filled in the rest of the grid, and as I'm watching now, I'm thinking this would have been a perfect time to make an acetate card front with all of these. How fun would a see-through card be? Now, as I said, I had a lot of dots that were cut from the O's, so I took the opportunity to create another card front here. I used the Lingo Happy die cut, and I used black for the shadow and white for the letters. These letters are slightly smaller, but they are the same font as the alphabet set I'm using. I also used some words from a So Thankful for You sentiment from the You Are Awesome set to add to my die cut sentiment. Then I placed a bunch of my glittery dots all over the card front, trying to create a happy, bouncy feeling card. Again, I paid attention to my color mix, and I used some of the bigger dots as well as a lot of the smaller ones. This was a really nice bonus card that resulted from my original plan, which we'll get back to now. I still had some dots left, and I couldn't store them on my mat forever, so I put the smaller dots into the centers of the skinny O's to add more interest to my design. I trimmed my panel down to fit on a card, and then I got to work on my sentiment. I stamped and die cut the thanks from Lingo Thanks and decided that I really needed to have that space on my panel filled with more glitter O's. You can see that I now have them stored on a silicone mat from my travel glass media mat. I colored in the thanks word with a black Copic marker and then cut tiny pieces of foam tape and popped it up. Again, the font of this sentiment is the same as the alphabet dies I'm using, so everything works together. Now, we haven't used the stamps much yet, and I was really interested to see how a similar pattern of fat and skinny O's would work when I stamped them rather than cutting them. I started in a corner to help me with placement, and I had the stamps on 2 separate acrylic blocks. I did try putting them on one block and stamping them together to save some time, but I couldn't get them placed so that the 2 O's would be touching, and then I had a hard time spacing the next 2 O's. 2 blocks allowed me to really see where I was stamping. You could use a MISTI, of course, and you might even get better precision, but I think it would take a lot more time. I continued my pattern about 2/3 of the way up my panel, and then I stopped. I wanted to add some color to the design, so I got out the same inks I had used before, and I used the single line O to stamp inside the outline O. Finally, I used the single line letters and I stamped thanks across the top of my circle pattern. I think this is a really fun look. The stamped colors almost seem to give a look of dimension to the design. I hope you enjoyed this video. Alphabet stamps or dies are a great basic to have in any craft room. Not only can you spell sentiments and personalize your projects, but they can be useful in other fun designs too. Product links are below and on my blog. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.